Wow, that's a great question. God's wrath in the New Testament, especially in light of verses like John 3:16 and 17. And John 3:16, my most famous verse in the Bible, right? For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever believes in him will not perish but have everlasting life. But so often we forget to read the next verse, which says, for God did not send his Son into the world to condemn the world or to judge the world, but to save it. Save it. That's the idea of a soterion or sozo, to make whole, deliver, completely deliver in every area. Wow, that doesn't sound very judgmental. That doesn't sound very condemning, and it especially doesn't sound very wrathful. So what is this idea of God's wrath? And it is there. It is there. But it's not maybe the kind of the idea of wrath that we always have. We have the idea of, thunderbolts and lightning, very frightening kind of idea. That's the kind of idea we have about God's wrath. But what do we see? In Romans 1:24 talks about the wrath of God. And what does it say? What does it say? It says he gave them over to the lusts of their heart. And in Romans 1:28, what does it say? It says he gave them over to their demented mind. Okay, so it's saying that the wrath of God is really abandoning these people to their own desires, their own lusts, their own dark way of thinking. Because what? He's not going to force them to love him. I mean, obviously, what good is love if it's forced? Is it even love? If you've got the Stepford wife, girlfriend that says, oh, I love you, but it's really a toy that somebody's pulling a string on and says, I love you, because it's been forced, it's been created that exact way. It has no other choice. Is that truly love? You know it's not. Of course it's not. And so God created us as human beings and took an incredible risk and gave us the ability to completely choose against his good and loving purposes. That's amazing. That's amazing. When within that choice that God made was the potential for him to suffer incredibly. He took an incredible risk. And yet he took it. Yet he gave us the freedom. He gave each of us freedom to choose for him or against him, to choose love or not. And this is why freedom is so important. But this is where the wrath of God really comes in, and you see it expressed. He gives them over to the lusts of their heart. He gives them over to their demented thinking, to their mind and their dark thinking, worshiping the creation, the animals, the stars, whatever, instead of him. Wow. Broke his heart. Yet he lets them go because he's unwilling to force. Unwilling to force. And where do we see this? This is an unusual place to find this. But where do we see it? Where do we see this? We see it in the story of the prodigal son. Say, what? Where do we see wrath in the story of the prodigal son? Well, first, think about this. Think about this. Jesus, it says in Luke 15 that all the tax collectors and the sinners were coming to him, and that the Pharisees were upset because he was letting them come to him. And so he tells them the story about the lost sheep and then the lost coin, but this didn't seem to satisfy the Pharisees. So then he tells them the story about the prodigal son and says, this is what God is like with the human race. And he's got this son, right? And this son says, you know what, Dad? I wish you were dead so I could get my inheritance, but you're not. So could you please give me my inheritance and pretend like you're dead and just give me my half, because I want to go, because I really don't love you. Think of how offensive that would be if one of your children did that to you. Just think of how brokenhearted you would be if that's all they valued your relationship with you. But isn't this kind of what the human race did to God? Isn't this kind of what we did to him? And so they go away. The son goes away. The lost son goes, and he goes out there, and what does he do? He takes the money that the father's given him. The father actually, it says, sells off half of his estate and gives it to him. And he takes off to this other country, and he blows all of his money on riotous living, sleeping with prostitutes, having parties with friends who aren't really friends. It's all gone. He's in a devastated situation. He's eating with pigs. He's taking care of pigs. I mean, can you imagine a worse situation for a Hebrew boy to be taking care of pigs? How devastating, yet that's where he's at. Finally, he wakes up. This just terrible situation wakes him up, and he's like, oh, okay, you know what? I'm going to go back to my father, and I'll just be a servant. And right there, it shows you that he doesn't have quite the right idea about his father, doesn't have quite the right idea about his dad. Why? Because his answer is going back and being a servant. I'll earn my rescue. I'll earn my rescue. I'll just be a slave. But I know slaves have enough at least to eat in my dad's household, so I'll just be a slave. I'll earn my way back. But I'll be willing to stay a servant. Okay. I won't be a son anymore. I'm not worthy. I'm not worthy to be a son. And then, so we have that element. It's the way the father sees the son and loves him, and the way the son sees himself, and the incorrect way the son views the father. These are all in this story. And then we see, and here's where we see the Father that Jesus is showing us, and the wrath of God at the same time. This is crazy. So the son comes back, and what happens? The father sees him, it says, coming from a long distance and runs out to meet him. Do you know the father taking that action in that culture, running out to meet that son? That's a humiliating thing to do, and yet he did it. And did he greet him with a correction? Did he greet him with, oh, you should have done this, and look, you spent all the money, and did he come up with a plan where, okay, now you got to work a little bit as a servant, and we'll set aside part of that money, and we'll pay your thing back, and then we'll decide how much you're going to get of it? None of that. What does the father do? He puts the best robe in his household on the son. What? Probably that was the father's robe. Best one. Here you go. I love you. He greets him not with a correction, not with a stern word. He greets him with a hug and a kiss. This is God and the human race. This is God and you, lost, not knowing where to go, what to do, totally desperate. Greets you with a hug and a kiss. And then what happens? He greets you with a hug and a kiss, and then he puts the robe around your shoulders. He puts his ring on your finger. What does that? Says the servants, go get the ring and put it on his finger. What does that ring represent? That ring represents all the Father's resources. It's a family crest or a family signet ring. You stamp it in the wax and send the invoice back to the Father's house, and it's paid for, whatever it is. The Father's saying, I'm giving you back the authority as my son to pay for whatever you need to. Wow. He's already, why? Everything that I have, son, is yours. So then now we're going to have a party for him. What? I don't understand, Dave, where's the wrath? I don't see any wrath in this. No, you don't. You see an incredibly loving Father, don't you? Wants and longs to bring restoration. Puts the ring back on his finger that says, hey, everything, I'm not just going to give you back your little peace or make you earn it. I'm giving you everything. And we're having a party to celebrate your back. And who's out in the courtyard? His older brother. All mad, all angry, all upset they're having a party. Dad, you've never given me a party. You haven't even killed a goat for me. What's going on? This brother, this son of yours, it's not even my brother, has gone off to a foreign land. And what did he do? Spent everything. Now think about it. The father sold half of everything he has. So now, what's left, right, is just the brother's inheritance. But the father's put the ring back on his finger, saying what? You got access to everything again. So now the older brother might even be thinking, hey, is half my stuff, this is supposed to be mine. Is half of it gone now? You're not even throwing a party for me? What the heck's going on? And the father says to the older brother, what does he say? Don't you know? You could have had a party anytime you wanted. Everything I have is yours. And so then you still ask me, so Dave, where's the judgment? I just don't see any judgment in any of this. The judgment's at the very beginning. When the father says what? You really want to go, son? It's breaking my heart. You really want to go? Okay, I'll let you go. Here's his judgment. I'm going to sell half of everything I have. And I'm going to take half and I'm going to give it to you and I'm going to let you go. That's his judgment. He gave them over to the lusts of their heart and the depravity of their mind. That son thought he wanted something, thought he was looking for something, thought he'd find it somewhere else in the father, when he had the most loving, most incredible father that there was. The judgment, the wrath, was where it is in Romans 1:24 and 1:28. The father let him go. That was the father's wrath. Why does the father use that kind of wrath? Because the father so believes in love and so knows that in order to have a loving relationship with his son, he has to risk his son rejecting him, which in the history of the human race and the history of the prodigal son, we did. And now we have the loving Heavenly Father calling us back.